a former student of my mother's, in order to take revenge on her. Kept me as his mistress with a monthly allowance of 30 yuan when he grew up. I needed the money and had been admiring him for a long time. So I let him torment me. On a snowy day, he made me kneel before the mother of his first love. That was when I completely gave up and let go of my obsession. He asked, "Do you think going abroad can solve all problems?" I replied, "It can't solve the problems. But it can keep me from seeing you again." Because of this sentence, he smashed the immigration agency that was handling my overseas study procedures. Arjun hated my mother deeply. And this hatred originated from high school. Back then, he had a puppy love with Vivian, the school beauty. And their love story spread throughout the school. As the dean of students, my mother criticized them in a school-wide announcement. There was nothing wrong with her educating students. But she shouldn't have posted the notice of criticism on the school gate. And she pointed out that Arjun and Vivian had extremely improper conduct, skipping classes to go to a hotel outside the school. In fact, they didn't. Their classmates could testify that they skipped class that day to watch Roman Holiday at the cinema. My mother insisted that she was right. She had always regarded puppy love as a scourge. She would rather wrong 100 than let a single couple get away. She would rather overcorrect than let those with puppy love have an easy time. Poor Vivian was then pointed at and gossiped about by her classmates. They called her promiscuous. And some even said worse things. She was a good student with proper conduct. But her reputation was ruined, and just like that, Vivian's mother was so angry that she rushed into the school, grabbed her by the hair, and demanded that she drop out. I still remember that day clearly. The sunlight was particularly glaring, and my mother was still standing on the podium, solemnly giving a lecture. Arjun ran out of the classroom to rescue Vivian. As he left, he gave my mother a fierce glare. And he also glared at me. The young man's originally beautiful and clear and shaped eyes were gloomy and fierce at that moment. Like a knife, cutting my heart. Many years later, he would look at me with such eyes in bed. "Elian, if your mother knew that her good girl daughter was having sex with me, would she be so angry that she'd die?" I curled up in pain, my eyes blurred with tears. Arjun bent down and answered his own question in my ear. "No. After all, it was her who, in order to save her precious son, pushed you into my arms." Arjun gave me 30 yuan a month, which was enough for my younger brother Nathan and to have 10 kidney dialysis sessions every month. Nathan was diagnosed with uremia when he just entered university. The treatment cost was extremely high, which was like a bolt from the blue for our family. My mother, who had been teaching for many years, was dismissed because of her poor reputation. My father was a small-time employee in a company, and our family couldn't afford the high medical bills. At that time, I had just graduated from university. My parents kept sending me messages, telling me to earn money quickly. Quickly, kahin fosil land session. Quickly. I majored in literature and couldn't find a high-paying job at all. One day, my father sent me a message. "Elian, you're beautiful and young. You should be very attractive to rich men. Your brother has only one life. Please save him." The moment I saw the message, my heart broke. Just because I'm the older sister, I don't deserve to be treated as a human being. Right? I couldn't understand how there could be such a father in the world. I didn't believe it. But as soon as I got home, I heard crying. My mother was weeping. And my father was wailing. They were silently questioning me, after raising me for more than 20 years. What's wrong with sacrificing me a little? Nathan is my own younger brother. How could I just stand by and watch him die? So when Arjun sent me a message, 30 yuan a month, XX International Hotel, room 6,908, I replied with one word, "Okay." It wasn't entirely for Nathan. In fact, when I accepted Arjun, there was a sense of atonement. To atone for my mother's sins. And also for my own sins. My sin was that in the early spring of my senior year of high school, I shouldn't have developed feelings for him. In the campus full of plane trees, everyone wore the ordinary blue and white school uniform. Arjun stood out in the crowd, tall, handsome, and his pair of bright black calm and shaped eyes sparkled when he smiled. I was originally a bookworm shaped by my mother, the dean of students, and I only focused on studying. But whenever I saw him, the suppressed young seedlings in my heart grew wildly. Once, heading to Silhouette Sai, during a PE class, the class had free activities. Arjun was playing basketball in the stadium. I sat in the stands, pretending to recite books and review. But actually I was secretly paying attention to him with my peripheral vision. My palms were full of sweat. Sitting in the stands, I felt like I was sitting in the clouds. Suddenly, there was a burst of cheers on the court, saying that player number 7 had made a 3-point shot. Number 7 was the number on Arjun's jersey. I sat up straight and took a quick look down. But by chance, I just met his clear eyes. In those few seconds of eye contact, time seemed to stop for me. But then, with a thud, the basketball hit the back of his head. He grimaced and covered his head. He was so handsome that even his grimace was cute, like an angry cat. But he didn't think so. He looked around nervously, afraid that others would know that he, a great basketball player, had been hit by a basketball. He looked up at me and bluffed. "Hey, heading fulfilled my obsession. You didn't see anything just now. Okay? I was stupidly holding my books." He smiled, his almond-shaped eyes curving like crescents, gathering thousands of starlights, and said softly, "Forget what just happened. 3, bingo." He made a gesture, imitating the memory eraser in the movie Men in Black, and fired at me. It hit my heart right on. Although the studies in senior year of high school were heavy, I started keeping a diary, writing down my fantasies about the young Arjun. His eyes, his laughter, and his handsome posture when playing basketball. My mother peeked at my diary. She shouted at me, slapped me, and punished me to kneel for most of the night. From then on, she started paying extra attention to Arjun. In her eyes, he was a dangerous person who would ruin my future. So after the news of Arjun and Vivian's puppy love spread wildly in the school, my mother dealt with them severely. She wanted to make an example of them, especially for me, warning me that if I didn't study hard, I would end up like them. Vivian failed the college entrance examination that year and transferred to another school to repeat the senior year. And Arjun became gloomy and terrifying. He overperformed in the college entrance examination. Although he could have entered a top-tier 985 university in China, he gave up studying in the country and went to study in the United States directly. I vaguely knew that he came from a well-off family. I never expected that his family was much richer than I thought. The first company I joined after graduation was an enterprise invested by his father. At that time, he came to visit the company, dressed in a suit, and was incredibly handsome. The boss and leaders followed him like the moon surrounded by stars. When he passed by my workstation, he stopped. "Elian?" I was delighted to see him again and smiled at him. But his next words made me feel like I was falling into an abyss. He asked me, "Is your mother dead?" During the days when I lived with Arjun later, he often mentioned my mother. He said, Elian, if it weren't for taking revenge on your mother, do you think I would be with you?" I remained silent and did my things earnestly. I was his gentle bed partner, cooked his favorite pickled cabbage and spare rib soup, reserved his favorite vinyl records, tidied up each of his suits, maintained each of his watches, pairs of cuffs, and ties. I was almost his personal nanny. My time was fully occupied by him. Every day when I opened my eyes, it was him. When Arjun was on a business trip, he would take me with him. I silently and skillfully took care of everything for him. Sometimes, when he was looking at documents, he would suddenly put his arm around my waist and let me sit on his lap. He buried his face in my long, loose hair and sighed softly. So fragrant. The rain was pattering outside the window. I had an illusion of being in love with him. I thought he had feelings for me. Otherwise, why would he secretly kiss me in the middle of the night, his lips soft and gentle, landing on the corner of my eye? Otherwise, why would he call me crazily every night when I wasn't by his side, asking me to talk to him on the phone? Otherwise, Why would he hold my hand and stroll along the Champs-Élysées during our trip to Paris? When a passerby interviewed us about our relationship, he would look at me shyly and say in a low voice, "C'est ma copine." This is my girlfriend. When he didn't recall the past, we were happy. Just like all couples in the world. Our relationship was clean and healthy. But when he recalled the past, he became restless and irritable. Eliane, do you know that our relationship is dirty? If I didn't give you 30,000 yuan a month, would you still be by my side? Your mother doesn't deserve to be a teacher. She misled students. She has no sense of propriety, righteousness, integrity, or shame. Do you have any brains? Are you stupid? Don't you know that your parents favor sons over daughters? They treat you so unfairly. Yet you don't resist. I really hate people like you who are spineless and have no temper. When he got excited, he would take me to bed. I silently endured his outburst. And tears welled up in my eyes. Afterwards, he would always apologize to me and sigh softly. If only you weren't her daughter. Yes, I'd like to. Being my mother's daughter, I have original sin. I thought that if I kept atoning for my sins, I would eventually reach a day of reconciliation with Arjan. But then Vivian appeared. She found Arjan and hoped to rekindle their relationship. Vivian was very tough-minded. And her personality was exactly the opposite of mine. I was gentle, soft, and cautious. She was bright, generous, and dared to love and hate. Back then, after the big incident in school, she transferred to another school to repeat the senior year and studied art. Now she is a well-known painter. Some people say that her fame was built by her husband. She married an art academy professor who was much older than her. Despite others' gossip, she still went her own way. Later, when she found out that the art academy professor was having an affair, she immediately demanded a divorce. This divorce was extremely difficult for her. The man was a powerful figure with a lot of social resources. He hired lawyers from a top-tier law firm, trying his best to leave Vivian penniless. So she could only come to Arjan. That day, I had already set the dinner on the table. After Arjan received her call, he left to find her. I waited until 10 p.m. The pickled cabbage and spare rib soup had completely cooled down, and a thin film had formed on the surface. At 12 Arjan came back, reeking of alcohol, with lipstick marks on his tie. Have you been with her all this time? Arjan, do you know that I've been waiting for you? I tried to question him, but knowing I had no right to do so, my voice was trembling slightly. Arjan's drunken and shaped eyes were hazy. She kept crying in my arms. I couldn't push her away. His appearance made me feel a surge of pity. I held his face and said earnestly, "In the future, only I can lean on your arms. Okay? I really like you. We've been living together for 5 years. And I've fallen in love with you. Arjan. I know I'm not worthy. But I can't hold back my overwhelming love." He probably doesn't know that it took all my courage to say this. Arjan was mostly sobered up from the alcohol. His eyes became sharp and keen again. And he sized me up with a hint of disgust. "Eliane, don't forget the 30,000 yuan monthly allowance. Do normal couples need such a large amount of gift? The relationship between you and me has never been normal. Don't try to have both money and love. Eliane, you don't deserve it." I started seeing a psychologist. I went to a private clinic secretly, hiding it from others. The doctor is very famous. I heard he's a promising young star in the field of psychology. His consultation fee is also quite high, 600 yuan for half an hour. I booked 1-hour consultations once a week. That month, my mom asked me, "Did you transfer the full 30,000 yuan to the card?" I asked, "Why?" She said, "There's a shortage of 4,800 yuan. I didn't say that I used the 4,800 yuan to see a psychologist. If my parents knew, they would just blame me for wasting money and wonder why I didn't use the money to buy supplements for my younger brother." So I remained silent. Surprisingly, my mom didn't keep pressing me. She suddenly squatted down and touched the leg of my pants. "The woolen pants are coming apart at the seams. And you're still wearing them? Take them off, and Mom will mend them for you." It was the middle of winter. I was wearing silk wide-leg pants with a pair of woolen pants inside to keep out the cold. Arjun made fun of me for treating such worn-out woolen pants as treasures and wearing them every day. Because these were knitted by my mom herself. I always wore them. Always. I was trying to prove to myself that my mom cared about me. Her daughter. That day, I took off the woolen pants and gave them to my mom to mend. I wanted to get into bed to warm myself up. But then I received a call from Arjun. His voice was gloomy. Come out. I'm waiting for you at the entrance of the community. It started to snow outside. When my mom learned that Arjun was calling me, she didn't say anything. She just gave me an umbrella and let me go. After all, she still had some backbone and didn't lecture me on how to please Arjun. But this was already quite ironic. The cold wind outside was biting. I wrapped my down jacket tightly. And my legs, which were only wearing silk wide-leg pants, were so cold that I could hardly walk. My legs finally warmed up after I got into Arjun's Rolls-Royce. Arjun was silent and solemn all the way. I tried to ask him where we were going. He gave a strange laugh and said, "To atone for your sins." The car stopped in front of a mourning hall. Many people coming to pay their respects were going in and out. Vivian, Mamatsur, dressed in mourning clothes, was receiving them with tears still on her face. In high school, because of your mom. Vivian's mother learned that Vivian and I went to a hotel. She was so angry that she had a gastric hemorrhage and a perforation that day, and was sent to the hospital for emergency treatment. Since then, her health has been poor. She passed away last week due to gastric cancer. The more I heard, the more shocked I became. I turned to look at Arjun. His eyes reflected the snow light. Extremely cold. He said, "Go and kneel to her." The Buddhist chant of Great Compassion mantra was being recited repeatedly in the mourning hall. Incense was curling up. Clothes rubbed against each other. Many people were squeezing against me. And many pairs of eyes were looking at me. Those kneeling in the mourning hall were all descendants of Vivian's mother, nephews, nieces, and nephews-in-law. Ordinary mourners only needed to bow. Arjun pulled me in. He knelt down first, offered a stick of incense, and then stood up and asked me to kneel. I was only wearing a pair of thin wide-leg pants and was already so cold that I could barely stand. I said I didn't want to kneel. Arjun said, "You must kneel. You're kneeling for your mom. Your mom owes her." He kept urging me. Vivian stood aside and watched me the whole time. Her eyes were red, and her gaze was fixed on me, looking full of hatred. Arjun gave me an ultimatum. "If you don't kneel today, I'll break up with you. And there will be no more 30,000 and you on monthly allowance." I knelt down. The sound was particularly loud when I knelt. My knees hit the floor. And everyone was looking at me. I heard the sound of snow falling. When I described this incident to the psychologist later, I was very calm, even with a hint of self-deprecating smile. That day, in fact, I only knelt for about half a minute. But every second felt as long as a year. It was as if I had knelt for 30 years. My knees were in excruciating pain, and I suspected I had frostbite. When I got home exhausted, I asked my mom, "Mom, have you mended my woolen pants? I want to wear them now." My mom was tidying up in the kitchen and ignored me. So I went into the room to get them myself, only to find that my woolen pants had been unraveled into a ball of wool. My mom said, "Your brother's woolen pants are too short. And there isn't enough wool." I unraveled yours to mend his. "Elaine, you can buy a new pair yourself. Anyway, it's not something valuable." Oh, I see. But my heart hurt so much. Over the years, it felt like there had been a knife scratching and cutting at it, leaving my heart full of holes and bleeding all over. That day, I held a ball of wool, crying and laughing, as if I were crazy. My mom asked, "Is it really that serious, Elian? It's just a pair of woolen pants. You're not short of money. Didn't you secretly spend the 4,800 yuan?" I suddenly stood up and shouted at her. "Am I adopted? Mom, don't you know how badly you've treated me over the years? Only Nathan is your biological child. Right? Right." This was the first time I had an outburst in so many years. I directly flipped the dining table at home. and bowls, plates, and dishes crashed to the floor and broke. I left a sentence. I'm done. Just consider me dead. At this moment, in the psychologist's consulting room, when I repeated just consider me dead, I couldn't help but laugh. It felt so relaxing. When I said that, I realized that I was actually alone. I'm not anyone's daughter or anyone's sister. I'm a living person. The psychologist listened quietly. The lenses of his glasses reflected the light, making him look both unfamiliar and reliable. I continued to tell my story. That night, I rushed out of the house and limped in the heavy snow for a long time. Arjan kept calling me, but I blocked him. I walked onto the viaduct and looked at the scenery in the distance. Suddenly, I forgot many things. Zhang Dai's viewing the snow at the Mid-Lake Pavilion clearly emerged in my mind. The rime-clad trees were glistening. The sky, the clouds, the mountains, and the water were all in one wide expanse. I also thought of the overpass near my grandma's house when I was a child. The cables were spotlessly white, like pigeons spreading their wings to fly. There were many little beautiful memories, emerging noisily in the darkness. I cried, limping along, with tears streaming in the wind. They were hot and warm. I suddenly realized that I wasn't completely broken. There was still a lot of beautiful energy stored deep in my body, which emerged to save me when I wanted to commit suicide. So I decided not to die. I want to live alone. Away from them. Live on my own. The upper part of the hourglass was completely dry. I looked at the time. It's already 1 hour and 23 minutes. I'm sorry, doctor, for taking up your time. He's a famous doctor. And every second is precious. I couldn't afford to waste his time. Thank you for your treatment. I benefited a lot. This is my last visit. I won't have money for it in the future. I smiled self-deprecating lie. After all, I've decided to break up with Arjan. From now on, I'll have to support myself and earn a living with my salary. The doctor took off his glasses, revealing a pair of clear eyes. Okay. The consultation time is over now. We're no longer in a doctor-patient relationship. Senior, do you still recognize me? The doctor's name is Cedric. I was first puzzled. And then it dawned on me. Oh, you were also in the college poetry club. Yes. He smiled, his eyes bright. I was 1 year junior to you. Senior. I've always remembered that you wrote poems very well. I haven't written poems for a long time. When I thought of my college years, I just felt shy and embarrassed instinctively. Cedric actually recited a line directly. I especially like the line you wrote. The stars of chaos shatter and fall on the courtyard parasol tree. The green shadow and the sparse wind. 1,000 li solitude. I was stunned. Memories of the past came flooding back into my mind, with white clouds floating in the blue sky. In the high school campus, hadn't fulfilled my sigh. The parasol trees cast deep green shadows. Arjan's eyes were as bright as if filled with broken stars from the Milky Way. Bicycling was not allowed on campus, but he defiantly rode his mountain bike, whizzing through the crowd, creating a strong gust of wind. The stars of chaos shatter and fall on the courtyard parasol tree. The green shadow and the sparse wind. 1,000 li solitude. So much time has passed. Arjan's eyes are no longer as clear as they were back then. No longer filled with starlight. His eyes are now rather deep, soaked with the fatigue of years of fighting in the business world. On the contrary, Cedric in front of me, with his clear eyes, reminds me of Arjan in those days. He's a very nice person. After learning that I was looking for a job, he helped me make connections and introduced me to an elder in a magazine. That elder read the miscellaneous notes, poems, and essays I usually wrote and was actually willing to give me a commercial manuscript order to let me have a try. I was so excited that I immediately agreed. Because I was so eager to prove myself, I found a Starbucks and started writing. This commercial manuscript was a high-level soft article. It took me 8 or 9 hours. And I was busy until evening. Cedric came to accompany me at mealtime. We ate and chatted. He's really a warm and kind person. After I submitted that commercial manuscript, I got 1,000 yuan payment. This was the first money I earned fairly and squarely in 5 years. I was extremely grateful for this 1,000 yuan. I was so happy that I was on the verge of crying. I wanted to share my happiness immediately. But when I thought about it carefully, I realized that I had no one to share it with. Because I was kept by Arjan. I felt extremely inferior and cut off contact with my former friends. I have no lover, no family, and no friends. This is my current situation. In the evening, Cedric sent me to the villa area. I was going to pack my luggage. I don't want the luxury items Arjan gave me, but I'll take away my own affordable clothes and daily necessities. The wind was strong outside. After getting out of the car, Cedric handed me a mask. Senior, put this on. The mask he gave me was not an ear-loop type but a head strap type. I didn't know how to put it on. So he lowered his head to help me. Suddenly, a strong high beam light shone from the opposite side. I covered my eyes and saw Arjan through my fingers. He was standing next to the Rolls-Royce, staring at us with a gloomy face. After learning that I was going to move out, Arjan sneered. Is it because of that pretty boy? Is he your new sugar daddy? Elian, Mamoun. Aren't you cheap? I felt nothing after hearing this because I didn't care anymore. It didn't matter. Anyway, I was leaving soon. I had already decided what to do next. I was going to save money as soon as possible and then go abroad as quickly as I could. I'm asking you a question. Elian. Arjan raised his voice. I casually replied. Yes. I was cheap before. If I weren't, I wouldn't have been kept by you. Arjan was stunned by my words. After a moment, he asked again. Then what's your relationship with that pretty boy? How did you meet? How long have you known each other? Last night. You blocked my calls. Was it because you were with him? I couldn't help laughing. His imagination was really rich. But a straightforward guy like him probably couldn't guess even if he racked his brains that Cedric didn't like women. In Cedric's youth, there was also a young man he couldn't forget, but that person had already gotten married and had children. He understood me well because we both had personally experienced what it meant to love someone but not be able to have them. Arjan became more and more impatient. Are you really going to leave? Elian. I'm telling you. Once you step out of this door, don't even think about coming back. Okay. I had already packed my clothes and pulled the suitcase. It's only the 20th today. It's not the end of the month yet. Don't you want this month's 30 yuan? I don't want it. After you leave, I'll throw away everything in the house that you've touched. Not a single thing will be left. Oh. I put the bank card on the coffee table and left, dragging the suitcase. Suddenly, there was a loud crash behind me. Arjan had smashed the porcelain in the display cabinet. The Langyao red glazed porcelain, worth millions, was shattered all over the floor, like a pool of bright blood. I rented a small room in an apartment outside the North 5th Ring Road. It was very small and enclosed, with only a tiny window. It was worlds apart from Arjan's luxurious and spacious villa. I sat on the bed every day, writing commercial manuscripts and working hard to save money. Occasionally, Hudinso felt my obsession. I would go out to buy food or wander around the mall near the apartment, which had few customers. That day, I saw a person wearing a Pikachu costume distributing flyers alone. My mind subconsciously associated it with Arjan. He liked Pikachu, Cinnamon Roll, Snoopy, Moomin. It might seem incredible that a person like him actually liked dolls. But when I left him, I thought he was so cute. Even though he was a decisive leader in the business world, there was always a soft-hearted little boy living inside him. Just like when he said, "One. Bingo!" to me on the basketball court back then. Sometimes he would show a naive and playful side, because his family was affectionate and harmonious, and he had led a prosperous life without experiencing many setbacks since childhood. He also saw the world in a kind way. However, the way my mother dealt with his puppy love in senior high school was a huge blow to him. It turned him into a gloomy jerk who tormented and took revenge on me. But now it's all over. I won't have any more contact with him. My parents, however, often contacted me, making phone calls and sending WeChat messages. On the surface, they were showing concern, but in fact, they were hinting around. asking me when this month's 30,000 yuan would be transferred to the card. Sometimes in the middle of the night, I would receive strange calls. When I answered, no one would speak on the other end. It was very strange. That night, just as I was about to turn off my phone, another strange number called. Hello? Who's this? There was still silence on the other end of the phone. Only soft breathing. Looking at the deep blue night outside the window, I suddenly had a big guess. Arjan? He immediately hung up the phone. Just then, at midnight, the pendulum of an antique clock from someone's house started to swing. Dong dong dong, it was long drawn out and melancholy. I wrote desperately, day and night, and managed to save a lot of manuscript fees in 1 month. Adding my past savings, I had about 50,000 yuan. It was enough to go to Hong Kong. I would plan carefully about going abroad. I wanted to go to Southeast Asia, to a place where there was no snow. I contacted an agency in advance to inquire about going abroad. They gave a detailed plan, and it seemed promising, but I wasn't sure if it was true or not. Just as I was searching for information online and carefully thinking about what to do next, I suddenly received a call from Cedric. He told me that Arjan was investing in his competitor, asking that psychological counseling room to lower its prices and attract away Cedric's customers. That is, Arjan was trying to trip Cedric up. The reason for his doing this was probably related to me. Cedric's voice was hoarse and tired. Senior, can you help me persuade him? I knew this was an unexpected disaster for Cedric. He had been so good to me, and I couldn't implicate him. So I readily agreed. Okay, I'll make an appointment with Arjan to meet as soon as possible. When I received the strange call again that night, I directly said, I want to see you. The breathing on the other end of the phone suddenly became rapid. Arjan said, okay, I'll come pick you up. I was stunned for a moment. It seemed that he had long sent someone to find out where I lived. I said, don't come. I'm going to the hospital to see my brother first. My parents must be there. I added with a cold laugh. You definitely don't want to see my mother, right? Because my parents always bombarded me with messages, disturbing my normal life. I thought it was time to make a clean break. I would see them one last time before going to Hong Kong. In the morning, I washed up, fried myself a poached egg, and after eating, I went downstairs. A Rolls-Royce was parked right at the entrance of the apartment. People passing by all looked at it curiously. I pretended not to see it and walked towards the bus stop with my hands in my coat pockets. But the Rolls-Royce kept slowly following me. I thought, forget it. Why argue with him? It would be better to take the time in the car to talk to him about Cedric's matter as soon as possible. I got into the passenger seat of Arjan's car. He stared at me for a long time. You've lost weight and have dark circles under your eyes. I ignored him. He said, come back to me. I'll give you 100,000 yuan a month. I looked up at him. Just from this glance, I could tell that he hadn't slept well for many days. There was a faint stubble on his chin. No. I was concise. Just as I was about to bring up the matter of Cedric, I sensitively noticed that his hands were shaking. What's wrong with you? I stared at him suspiciously. He said, I've been drinking heavily these days. Drinking all night long. My nerves are paralyzed. I was immediately flustered. He quickly said, don't worry. I didn't drink last night. After hearing you say you wanted to see me last night, I immediately controlled my alcohol addiction. Now my blood is clean, without any alcohol. He seriously explained to me, trying to catch my eye. I turned my head to look out of the car window and asked, why didn't you let the driver drive? After a long silence, he said, I want to be alone with you. I clenched my hands tightly. What did he mean? Did he want to get me back? But it was too late. My heart was completely broken. The moment I knelt down in front of Vivian's mother's morning hall, what I heard was not the sound of snow falling, but the sound of my heart breaking. Broken like melting snow. After arriving at the hospital, I walked into the inpatient department alone. My parents were not in the ward. Only Nathan was lying on the bed, playing games. He was very surprised when he saw me. Have you been traveling these days? I haven't seen you. No. But I will go traveling in a while. Where to? Nathan perked up at the mention of traveling. Is Arjun going with you? I was silent for a moment and then told him. I broke up with him. There won't be 30. Zero yuan every month from now on. Nathan immediately said. No way. I said coldly. Whether it's possible or not is not up to you to decide. I'm your sister. Not your ATM. I have my own life and can't be kidnapped by you guys forever. Nathan shouted. I'm your brother. The law stipulates that if parents are unable to support their children, the older sister has the obligation to support the younger brother. You must fulfill this obligation. You must give me money. I shrugged inferiorly. Okay. Go sue me then. Do you believe that the most the court will order me to pay is 3 yuan a month? Realizing that I was determined, Nathan jumped up and questioned me. How can you be so stupid? Arjun is such a rich cash cow. Why can't you hold on to him? I sneered. If you're so capable, you go hold on to him. Let him keep you. Nathan roared. Oh. So you still think it's beneath you to be with him, right? You think you shouldn't be capped? Sis, do you think I'm stupid? Mom already told me that you've had a crush on Arjun for a long time. You couldn't stop thinking about him. Using your body to get money for my treatment was just a pretext. In fact, you've always wanted to be with him, right? And you still want to pretend to be helpless. Still want to be a whore and set up a chastity archway. I slapped him hard. Nathan. You're over 18 years old. I have no more obligation to support you. From now on, I'll cut off our sibling relationship. You won't get a single cent from me anymore. I opened the door of the ward and was surprised to see Arjun standing outside. He had been eavesdropping on our conversation. I didn't know how long he had been listening. At this moment, his voice was trembling as he asked me cautiously. Elaine, did you have a crush on me before? No. Never. I quickly walked out of the corridor, but happened to run into my parents head-on. When they saw me, their eyes lit up immediately. Like a cat seeing a mouse. Elaine, where have you been? You haven't come to see us for a long time. My mother's face froze when she saw Arjun behind me. You too? What are you? Mom, I'm here to tell you that I'm going abroad. I may not come back in the future. You and Dad should take care of yourselves from now on. My father stared wide-eyed. Elaine, what do you mean? You're abandoning us? You won't support us in our old age? My father was always jumpy, with poor self-restraint. All his emotions were written on his face. He wasn't as good at pretending as my mother, who affectionately took my arm. Come on. We're family. There's no need to be so formal. We made chicken soup for Nathan today. Come and have some with us. I won't go. Mom. I'm just here to say goodbye. My mother glared at me. She used to be the dean of students, and her remaining prestige was still there. But now I was much taller than her. Looking down at her frowning and glaring, I just found it ridiculous. Our mother-daughter relationship had reached this point, and there was no need to continue. I raised you with all my hard work. How much money and effort did I spend? Now that you've grown up and become independent, you don't take me seriously anymore. Right? Yes, having fulfilled my say. Mom. Because you don't deserve to be a mother. Being your daughter. I feel so tired. I've thought about committing suicide countless times. If there's an afterlife, I definitely don't want to be reborn into your family. My mother raised her hand to slap me, but Arjun firmly grabbed her wrist. He said slowly and solemnly, Teacher. Stop embarrassing yourself. My mom is most afraid of hearing the word teacher, because she used to be proud of being the dean of students and took pleasure in using her power to oppress students. She thought she was doing a great job, but in the end, the parents of the students jointly reported her to the Education Bureau and forced her to resign. When her old wound was reopened, she immediately lost control of her emotions and started scolding me. It's all because of you. You good for nothing. If you had chosen a good major in college and become a boss to make a lot of money, would we be suffering like this now? I've heard this kind of talk countless times. Whenever she gets irritated, she scolds me. Scolding me for not being able to earn money, for not being able to buy a house. I've become so used to it that it doesn't hurt or itch anymore. But Arjun started to get angry. Come to think of it, this was the first time he had witnessed my mom scolding me with his own eyes. Are you even talking like a human? Do you deserve to be a mother? Since you saw her until now, you haven't asked once if she's doing well. If she's been tired outside. All you think about is money. 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 Your mind is full of ways to extort money from her. Do you know how tired she is? She's so stressed that she's seeing a psychologist. She lives in a small room and stays up late writing every day. I often see the lights in her room go out at 2 a.m. when I'm standing across the street. And you guys? Living at home unemployed and having a good time. Fattening up your son. 3 mouths to feed. All relying on her alone. My mom shouted. Mind your own business about our family affairs. Arjun sneered. You don't want me to interfere. But you sure are happy to take the 30,000 due on monthly allowance. Let me tell you. From next month on, there won't be any more. This 30,000 is the last time. From now on, Ilian has nothing to do with you anymore. He threw the bank card on the ground. Several tall men rushed in from the end of the corridor. They were dressed in suits and looked at my parents with unfriendly eyes. Arjun grabbed my hand. I'll say it again. Take this money. And don't ask Ilian for money anymore. Otherwise, I won't be nice to you. I let him pull me out of the ward. In the matter of confronting my parents, he helped me. He was my temporary ally. Only after we went out did I start arguing with him. That 30,000 yuan. He interrupted me. You left me on the 20th last month. And today is also the 20th. Stay with me for the remaining 10 days to complete the month. Consider this 30,000 yuan as the salary for that month. Is that okay? I wasn't willing. Even if I compensated him, the money wouldn't end up in my hands. Isn't this a case of forced buying and selling? Arjun pleaded with me. Just 10 days. Only 10 days. I promise I won't bother you after these 10 days. I'll send you abroad. And your parents won't be able to find you anymore. His last words touched me. I looked up and saw plum blossoms. A plum tree in the hospital's walking area. With scattered pink blossoms. The air passing through the flowers was thin and clear. Cedric's clinic. I'll let it go. I won't force him anymore. I just want you to come back to me. Even if it's only for 10 days. Do I hate him? Yes. After that kneeling in the morning hall, I've never forgotten my hatred. Do I still love him? I asked myself softly. I don't know. All love and hatred should have an ending. I said. Okay. We still slept in the same bed. But there was no more intimate contact. Arjun knew that I repelled him now. Both physically and mentally. So he didn't touch me. His cloakroom was on the 2nd floor of the villa. Every morning after getting up, I would take out the suit and shirt he had chosen the night before for him. Then I would go to the accessory area to pick a wristwatch, cufflinks, having fa, and a tie. In these last days, we simulated every day of the previous 5 years. With just one look from him, I would know which item he had chosen today. With just one glance from me, he would know to raise his head for me to tie the tie or raise his hand for me to fasten the cufflinks. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the greenery was thick, and the shadows swaying in the wind fell on the white marble floor, also a light green color. In the mirror, he was wearing a charcoal gray suit, and I was wearing a peach-colored slip dress. At this moment, the atmosphere between us was harmonious and gentle. Really like a couple. But we weren't. We were just temporary lovers. Or maybe not even lovers. The hatred between us was far greater than love. He said, I'm going to Hungary to do business the day after tomorrow. Will you accompany me? How many days? 2 weeks. I said. I only have 5 days left with you. Arjun's deep eyes were calm and sad at this moment. He said. I know. I'll buy you a return ticket in advance. He went to Budapest, the capital of Hungary, to do business. Since there were only the last 5 days left, he asked me not to leave his sight for a moment. When he was doing business, I acted as his assistant and sat right behind him. In fact, during the long international meetings, he was fully focused and didn't even have time to look back at me. But he insisted that I be present. As long as I know you're near me, breathing the same air, That's enough. The sunlight in Europe seemed thinner, and that in the northern part of our country filtered through the overcast clouds. It fell on him, dotting his outline with a soft golden glow. His back was straight, and his silhouette was handsome, with a sense of unwavering steadfastness. He was like his favorite plush toy, and also like his cherished vinyl record. I would wonder, is this the end? The last impression of him in my mind would be his back. On the last day, we took a walk along the Danube River. At 735. The moment the Parliament building lit up, it was retro and elegant, reflecting glistening waves on the river. Arjan suddenly said, "Vivian got divorced." I was taken aback, and then smiled. "Should I say congratulations? You two can get married again." He looked into my eyes seriously, and told me, "I've never dated her. The rumors of our early love backed and were just that, rumors." This was the first time I had heard him mention this. Vivian wrote me a love letter. She said she had depression and hoped I could save her. She said I was the only light in her life. I didn't like her and couldn't respond to her. But she said as long as I accompanied her to watch a movie, her favorite movie, Roman Holiday, I knew what happened next. Arjan skipped class to accompany her to watch the movie. And it spread among the students that the school hump and the school belle were dating. After your mom publicly criticized us, the first thing that came to my mind was that Vivian had depression. I was worried that she might commit suicide under such a blow. So whenever there was any sign of trouble, I stood up to protect her and even asked my dad to send money to her family. But later, I found out that Vivian's depression was fake. She had never had depression. She had been lying to me all along. Arjan's face was facing the magnificent Parliament building. There were tears in his eyes, and the tears fragmented the golden light into scattered stars. At this moment, his eyes were as clear as they were when he was a teenager. "I never thought that it was you who really had depression. You were by my side, but I never asked you about it." I turned my head and didn't look into his eyes. I replied casually, "It's all in the past. I'm fine now." "No, no. It's not past. It's not past for me." Arjan growled emotionally. He grabbed my shoulders tightly, as if he wanted to turn my body to make me look at him. But he quickly let go, being very careful, afraid of hurting me. I suddenly thought that there was a winning micro-story in a global collection back then. For her, it's over. But for me, it's not. This short sentence implied endless sadness. For someone, it was a magnificent tale of joys and sorrows. My plane ticket is for tomorrow morning, with a direct flight to Hong Kong. Tonight is the last night in Budapest. And also the last night for me and Arjan. I wanted to take a yacht ride and drink champagne. But Arjan was forcing me to express my feelings. "Elaine, don't be so cold to me. Okay? Whether you smile at me, cry, or get angry, I can take it. I'm just afraid of your coldness." I gave him a slight smile. "There's no need to think too much. We'll break up tomorrow. Let's get along peacefully today and part amicably." Arjan stared at me deeply. "I can't do it." I pulled my windbreaker tighter to fend off the cold wind. Just as I lowered my head, he said softly, "Because I love you." I thought it was an illusion. But then he repeated it, firmly and steadily. "I love you. Don't do this. You don't love me. What you love is the feeling of being in control. Because I escaped your control and made you feel uncomfortable. So you want to catch me back." I analyzed it rationally. Arjan's eyes, shining with golden light, stared at me without blinking. "Why can't I love you? I have the ability to love. I want to be good to you. I want to travel all over the world with you. I'm sure that my feelings for you are love, not a desire for control." The problem was, I didn't believe it. I had been to inferiority for too long. And I couldn't believe that he could love me. "Elaine, you're beautiful, kind, and gentle. We spent 5 years together, getting along day and night, and developing feelings bit by bit. How could I not love you?" I shook my head. "Love always comes suddenly. Only those who have never loved think that love is a gradual process of developing feelings." Arjan smiled, a boyish smile with his eyes curving. "Elaine, do you think you were the only one who was attracted to me on the basketball court back then?" His simple words almost broke half of the psychological defense I had built up over a long time. I didn't dare to ask further along with his words. It was like a bright abyss. Just then, Yiman sai. The yacht docked. And I wanted to buy a ticket to board. Arjun tightly held my hand. Elian, tell me, what other reason do you have to reject me? We met when we were young, had a mutual crush, and lived together when we were young adults. It seemed like a flawless process. We should have been a loving couple. But you trampled on my self-esteem. I took out my phone, opened the photo album, and showed him the snow scene I took on the city viaduct on the night I knelt in the morning hall. The rime was thick, and the sky, clouds, mountains, and water were all white as far as the eye could see. But what fell on my heart was the broken remains of snow all over the place. Unless time could turn back to the day at Vivian's mother's morning hall. But that's impossible. My despair was irreversible. Arjun immediately said. I knelt that day too. You knelt because you were willing to. But I wasn't. What I care about is that you forced me and didn't respect my free will. Just then, the yacht docked. I walked onto the pier plank, ready to board the ship. I apologize to you. I promise I'll never do it again. Arjun shouted behind me. I didn't look back and followed the crowd onto the ship. People from various countries gathered here. And the languages of different countries intertwined gently and wonderfully like unintelligible Sanskrit. This unexpectedly reminded me of the day in the morning hall. It was also filled with such murmuring Sanskrit and the rustling of clothes. But my heart no longer ached. It was all over. Like the flowing water leaving no trace. Both the sorrow and love ended at this moment. I raised the champagne, smiled at Arjun, and silently wished him to find his own happiness in the rest of his life. The same goes for me. End.